maybe their estimates weren't high enough, and then they can't finish the project because they're underfunded. So the projects that we have in Brown Tribes smart scale, the estimates went up substantially. At $42 million. That hydraulic and that's 20 months now. So it just, there's nothing we do about it. It's just it'll be interesting to see, with smart scale funding being limited, how many of these projects actually get funded now. Now this is not just us, of course, this affects all the estimates in the state, so they've all gone out. I don't know that the funding has gone up actually. So just information.
Yeah, there are a couple things, if you don't mind, that
Sure.
I can jump in. Just for those of you who are reading this, the table is broken up into 3 different categories for each project. So this is the base cost estimate. So that's the engineering cost estimate based on what they think the project will cost. Then there are the contingencies, which are sort of accounting for unknown risks. So there are additional contingencies that are applied to different projects based on what kind of risks might be expected that they need to mitigate. And then the last one is inflation, because transportation projects are basically implemented, the costs that the funding is allocated, projected out for 6 years, they're not going to be implemented right away. So there's an inflation cost that's also applied. And then within each of those different rows, you can see there's the PE, RW, and CN. These are the different project phases. So there's the preliminary engineering phase, the right-of-way phase, and then the construction phase. So this top row right here is showing what the base cost estimate is for all of those project phases. This second row right here is showing how much is being added to the overall project cost to account for any of the unknown risks. Because remember, we haven't done the preliminary engineering yet, so they don't know exactly when we're developing these project estimates, what kinds of potential obstacles or barriers they might run into. So they try to account for that. And then this last row right here is the overall inflation cost. The CTB, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, received its first presentation from the staff after evaluating all of the smart scale projects for round 5 at their meeting yesterday. And based on the staff recommended scenarios, they did recommend funding the 8 Street multimodal improvements project, but that was the only project that the MPO submitted that was recommended for funding. There were 2 other projects from the Culpeper district in our region that were also funded. One of them was improvements on Peter Jefferson Parkway. That included some access management improvements as well. So that was submitted by the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. And then improvements to Belvedere. That was the Green T intersection that was recommended for Belvedere and Rio. That was also recommended for approval. So those were the 3 projects within our MPO area that were recommended to receive funding.
Can I ask you the bridge, for example, has so much added to it compared to the other funds. And it seems to me it's roughly the same stage. I'm not sure, I can't quite tell from these numbers. It's the geology aspect of it. They don't know what's under the ground. So the waters for the bridge, it's totally unknown. So that's what's under the.
Yeah, it's in a really sensitive area. There's a lot of not just the ecological and the geotechnical concerns, but also there are a lot of historic features in that area. So until they do the environmental analysis as well, they're not sure what exactly they might need to adjust in order to build that bridge. So again, VDOT is VDOT, the Commonwealth Transportation Board is and VDOT is developing these funding applications without doing any of that preliminary engineering. So they have to think through what are all of the potential risks that might be presented as part of this project, and making sure that whatever they could possibly run into, they could cover the complete costs.
So the question I have is, what's going to happen with these other four? They're going to go, the other three, excuse me, the list here. Are going to go forward, they're going to drop off. I mean, the bridge was, in particular, was something that we discussed that was here. I don't know how to say it that way, but we've had a lot of discussion on. And so I'm just curious, that's.
Yeah, for the Albemarle River Bicycle and Pedestrian Bridge, and we can talk about this as much as you all want to, either now or later.
I want to know
Yeah.
what's going to happen with these projects.
Yeah. Well, the reason I say this about the bridge is because I think there's a really good opportunity to apply for some additional funding for the preliminary engineering phase to answer some of those unknown questions. So I think this aligns really well with the RAISE grant program through the it's a federal discretionary grant program, but I think because of its importance in connecting to highly dense urban areas in a safe way as an alternative to free bridge, I think this is a high priority for, to establish better connectivity in the region. The other two, I think we may be having some bigger conversations. It's possible that maybe we go back to the 5th Street project and look at how we could potentially pare it down a little bit to submit a kind of a more streamlined application next time. That's a little bit pared down, but maintaining many of the benefits. And the district avenue roundabout, I'm not sure if we're going to move forward at this point, or we'll potentially take a step back and kind of take another look at the hydraulic 29, the larger hydraulic 29 area. I think those are some questions we're going to have to work through with the policy board.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's good. That was helpful.
Okay, you said it's preliminary engineering right of way construction. What's CEI in this one?
CEI is oh, I forget exactly what it stands for. It's basically for like engineering and inspections and additional like permitting fees and things like that that might be incurred over the cost of the project. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you're sort of like stepping back and evaluating like the work that went into putting these together and then like the funding cycle, is there ever like an assessment or judgment on we feel like we missed an opportunity or we could learn, like is 1 out of 4 like good? Is it change all the time, or would this future efforts?
So in the previous round, which was it was an outlier, but there was this huge influx of money because there was a new wholesale fuels tax that was implemented. And so basically, remember, transportation funding is programmed 6 years out. So basically, by implementing a new tax, they had 6 years of projected revenue that hadn't already been programmed. So they added all of those 6-year projections of revenue as the last round. Previous round, we got 12 projects funded in our MPO area. So that was a little bit of a fluke and was something that we were advised very strongly not to expect. I think our project costs overall, you can see the price tags on these are pretty high. So I think I'm not surprised that we got 3. I think that's, I think I had very low expectations and, I'm pleased with this outcome. I think there always is an opportunity to evaluate, and that's one of the things that we do between rounds. And that's one thing that our VDOT staff also helps us do is help us plan better to have more competitive applications in the future. What happened specifically with the hydraulic 29 bundle that was approved in round 4 Smart Scale, the previous round, that we had submitted an application for a grade separated roundabout, and it had all these really great features associated with it, and the total price tag was $120 million, and it did not score well through Smart Scale. And so between round 3 and round 4, I wasn't really integrally involved at that point, but the MPO worked with the stakeholders that have developed the recommendations for the 29 hydraulic improvements, and really found ways where we could identify more targeted, less expensive projects. And I think that's really the direction that Smart Scale is going. In order to be more competitive, localities and local regions either have to find additional resources to be able to put towards projects to reduce the amount of funding you're asking for through Smart Scale in order to increase the competitivity, their ability to compete for funding, because it's on a cost benefit analysis, or we're going to have to just focus on ways that we can identify low cost projects that will have the most benefit. Yeah.
What were the other projects you said that were
That were in the MPO that were funded? Yeah. I can, let me stop sharing from the screen and share from my computer.
They're at your green tea.
It's US 250 at Peter Jackson.
Oh,
There's also a project in Nelson County that was recommended for funding, but that is technically in the Lynchburg district, and the other localities in our region do not receive any. So there's Avon Street. It's right there. That was the highest scoring of the projects in the MPO. And then there is the US 250 Peter Jefferson Parkway intersection that included a park and ride block. Do you remember how many? Or 50 cars. And then the Belvedere Boulevard and Riot intersection. So we're make that bigger.
So with the Belvedere Boulevard, isn't it just this one?
What's that?
What's the Belvedere Boulevard? Green tea. Oh, it's a green tea.
It's a continuous green tea, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, the Belvedere, yeah, what am I? Yes, no, continuous, green tea. Signalized green tea, yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was submitted by Albemarle County.
Right.
So that was nice that everybody that submitted an application in our MPO got to have one awarded to them. So that was very nice.
Now I'm just trying to make the connection to the long range transportation plan. We talked about sort of like the different metrics that I guess sort of the royal leaf are important to the community. How does that translate into the benefit calculation? Are those pretty well synced up? Or I'm assuming VDOT has their own way of calculating that.
Yeah, so that's one of the questions that we'll need to work through when we do the long range transportation plan. The general categories that are evaluated are similar. The actual methodology is going to be a little bit different because we are developing a way to measure the performance and the benefits of our project based on what we have the capacity to do, and not necessarily relying on all the tools that VDOT would have accessible. So there's some difference there. I think one of the questions that we'll have to answer as a region is, do our priorities align the same way that the state's priorities align, or do we want to place a higher priority on a different set of values than the state does? And that's going to be something that we're going to be working through in the public engagement process, as well as having conversations with you all and MPO Tech and the policy board to determine how much weight do we want to give to the different evaluation criteria. Yes.
I see sidewalk and multimodal are on there. Does bike lanes and bus lanes, does that also fall in the purview of VDOT?
If they meet VDOT's transportation standards, they can, yes.
Oh, yeah, I guess there's nothing else. I have a question. Just generating what we're already looking at, say that first table, does that come out of your budget? Do you all do that in the house?
The first, no, the table that we look at uses the methodology that is developed by VDOT.
Okay,
So
yeah.
VDOT generates all of those estimates. Yeah,
know what things cost.
yeah, but
So-
VDOT does all of that, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so there's not a lot of put on that this year. In terms of hiring consultants.
Yes, we do not do that. Now there is potentially some discussion on how there could be more of a back and forth and more of an opportunity for a conversation about those cost estimates. I think one of the important things that I would emphasize though is that because we are asking for the implementation of any of the projects that we submit to be administered by VDOT, they are the ones who are assuming the risk. And so it's really important that they are comfortable with the estimates that are developed.
You know, I recommended that the US 250 Louisa Road one didn't have a, all right. Okay, well, then you can go ahead with our next one. Transportation. You know, I'm looking through that, obviously, it covers a lot of things for the entire contract that are not relevant, because I assume the discussion will be tailored to the relevant stuff.
Yeah, originally we were going to ask VDOT staff to use that as an opportunity to talk about the different types of projects, the program funding and things like that. They had a conflict and were not able to be in attendance tonight. But I think that that report is a really good resource to sort of just know what's happening in our region. Gives a little, it gives a little bit of a, you know, if you have questions that somebody asks, hey, you're on the CTAC, what's going on with this project, you can answer them now, or maybe you wouldn't have been able to before. But I think we can, if you all are interested and want to hear more of an actual presentation about the different kinds of funding programs that are available that, you know, give us opportunities to implement projects, we can certainly make sure that that's scheduled at an upcoming meeting.
But for now, I guess we're not really gonna have a presentation of that. I mean, we
No.
all read it, so I mean, it's useful.
But if you have anything you want to talk about, this could be a good time to have a discussion.
Well, then we're on to something transportation plan.
So
Friendly is. So I looked through that thing, I was just curious on the Grolic and 29, when the intersection, there was a line or two that said they were gonna do something about the traffic signals there. You remember that? Is that ongoing? Is it just a notion? I was just, because I get a lot of complaints from my wife, so I wanted to.
Yeah. I think what you're referring to, Marty, is what is the original plan that also predated me a little bit was to synchronize the signals going up and down 29 into between the city and the county. I think the county synchronized their signals, but the city has had some difficulty synchronizing theirs, and there's a variety of reasons for that. But my understanding right now is that there hasn't been funding identified to move forward with the signal synchronization on the city side. And so they're trying to take a step back and, you know, reconsider what those options may be.
Well, let me bring up, so, as I said, I got complaints, I'm why I say CTAC, so explain what it is. Everybody has a comment to that traffic, and they like to see something done differently. Do we have like plans someplace where people can, I don't want, you know, I don't voice everybody's complaint that I hear, but is there a place where people can register? Should we set up like we don't?
We complain about traffic.
Yeah. No, that's one specific instances. For example, you know, number, we have this the new intersection at 250 and 64. This
The divergent diamond, yeah.
yes. Which I'm used to because they have one in Maryland that I went through all the time, but nobody else appears to be used to it. But there are a lot of comments about lines of sight, lines. Where people, where should people sort of explain what's bothering them and get it back to VDOT? That's really the question.
I think VDOT's website
doesn't have something.
I mean, I've certainly used it to complain about.
What you
Sidewalk
complain
issues and all.
about.
So, it
Yeah, it really makes sense for it to come to us because we're not, we're not engineering the
Not
traffic,
asking you,
yeah.
I understand it, but This is VDOT, that's not about.
yeah, they have a website where you can register complaints about all kinds of down signs and what traffic lights about, all kinds of things.
And,
They respond.
Yes, absolutely they do.
and the city public works department also has,
Well, that's. a-
yeah, also has a
I've
menu
never
to
really
do that,
looked
yeah.
at VDOT.
I'm in Nelson County and at one point people were posting like the phone number of the communications on social media, so I guess that's also an option if you really need to draw attention to
Okay,
something.
thank you. Right.
Okay, moving on to the long range transportation.
Yeah, so just to give you all a little bit of an update, we at the MPO technical committee, we reviewed the project prioritization process, which is wrapping up. I have been I spent the last month calling a bunch of people and emailing a bunch of people to try to set up some stakeholder discussion groups. So those should be starting to meet in February. And then we've been working on creating some draft content for the website. So I think that was included as part of your packet. And I thought that this would be a really good opportunity for you all to provide some feedback on mostly the content. I know that the format is not, leaves a lot to be desired, and we're going to work to improve that. But you all have made some statements like we needed a purpose statement and a why I should care about the plan statement, those kinds of things. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for you all to give me some feedback on, what your response might be to the draft content that we've developed. So if you all can see this, I don't know if I can get this bigger. So what I did was we have a couple of different sections, and really I think my where I landed with this moving forward is that if somebody asks, what is the long range transportation plan? There are kind of a number of different perspectives you could answer that question from. And so I tried to think through how I would answer that question and what different ways that that this might resonate, or the importance of it might land with different people. So I will say that I think, some of the feedback I got from our staff that reviewed this was I had this little line in here about making a personal connection to transportation. And I think originally that was a little bit lower down about why should I care about the plan? And the idea was that if we move it up, it might be more of a hook. I feel like it's a little out of place right there, but you all can tell me otherwise. But the first way to answer the question of what is the long range transportation plan or what is moving towards 2050 is that it's a required document that MPOs are required to prepare that identifies transportation priorities for the region. The second way to answer that question is why an individual should care about the plan or how it impacts them individually. So here I was really trying to emphasize what are the ways that the long range transportation plan will make a difference in how people go about their daily lives. If you're an average person, why will this plan be something that impacts you? This last question, or this next question, is what does the plan do? And it's really talking about what is the process of developing the plan. And then the last question is why is it important, which is really about what it is you use this plan for. So those were kind of the categories, but we can spend a little time. I don't know if you all want to go section by section, but we could talk a little bit about what you like about the page, what maybe doesn't land as well, or if this is laid out in the appropriate order. Just really wanted to have an opportunity for you all to give me some feedback.
I think, personally, I think breaking things up into like bullets and just like breaking up the text always helps, and so that, and then just the way I would read things, I tend to skip over paragraphs.
Mhm.
So I think that is helpful to draw people's attention. And then maybe also, whether it's like, actual images or even like graphics or something, I think that can kind of help communicate too, especially for folks like myself who tend to like scan things and see what your eye is attracted to. That could communicate things visually as well. So sometimes that can be kind of hard to do, but
Yeah,
With the basic organization of looks, well, I mean, from a formatting standpoint, I mean, I make lettering on the why should I care about, and as big as the others, but.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I think it answers the essential questions in layman's terms that. Most people should be able to. It's certainly not overly long. Makes good points that it needs to make sense. I think it's good.
well, thank you. Yeah, I think I've gone back and forth a little bit with our website manager. This is obviously a work in progress. I think he used the different text to try to just break it up a little bit more, but I think probably, I don't know, the at least to me, the smaller text is a little bit more difficult to read than the bigger text. He also, we had a timeline, and I don't know if you guys like this or not, but originally the timeline I had was vertical, and it showed the project phase on one side and then the public engagement on the other side. And what he did was, because we were having trouble fitting that all on the page, was he developed this little project ticker, which is kind of cool, and I like the general layout of it, but I also think it would be more helpful to be able to see the entirety of the project all at one time.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's in print. We can't do that.
Yeah.
Works good.
could you overlay the title of each of these cards?
Maybe, yeah. We'll try that. But I think Stuart, I might put you on the spot. I think you were the one who said we needed a purpose statement. So does this feel like it resonates with that statement?
Yeah, it totally seems like a one-stop shop. You kind of get information, understand why you should care. I think that's why there is.
Okay.
I like how like the highlighted in like purple part for sort of the layman speak for translating within the black and white text. But I do feel like the way that the text is formatted in the light purple, which could be more accessible to people, it's actually more wordy. It's more like it's even more paragraph than you expect.
I see.
Especially the second portion of it, because that example, it's really great. Like
Yeah, we can probably like bullet out some of these questions, for example. That might help break it out a little bit.
yeah.
Add some images. You well said, the last one. Yeah, this one is something maybe we can provide some separation between the different sections and maybe do something to like bold this first part to make it stand out. I don't know.
What would help with that from design standpoint is, taking first sentence or something like that, or maybe taking part of it, making it larger, so you can, see the meat at a glance, and then, decide to read.
If they want more.
if they want more.
Yeah. That's good feedback.
I think the timeline is neat, but maybe this is just me, but I feel like, if I'm looking at it, initially, and I don't know much about how this stuff works, I might think that it's a broken picture, and then you can't necessarily click over or drag. So I think some kind of, indication. I mean, there are errors at the end, but I'm still not sure that that is visible enough for folks.
Yeah, make it more clear that you can.
Do you start and end the timeline? Do you have any sort of like estimates for intermediary stuff, or is that just too?
It's kind of non-committal when I developed it, but I think we can probably put in some like seasons, like
It's not close. Yeah.
we could probably put it like summer or you know, yeah. Any other feedback?
I mean, if I were going on here as a citizen, as somebody who's really like concerned about climate change, I don't think that there's anything in here that stands out that is like inspiring to me that or gives me any like faith that this is like really gonna have an impact on it. I'm not saying that like, well, this is gonna be like the plan is built to have you know with that center, right, or have a major impact, even though like hopefully, but so I don't know if that's appropriate, if you think it's appropriate to like emphasize as a goal, or you know, I don't know, just have a little bit more connection to this, you know, city's climate action plans, because it's something we talked about last time, or anything around that. I would like to see that.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, where you have environmental impacts, it's like, say, environmental, including climate, just to make that point, that part of the important part of the environmental impact.
Yeah, I think if it's put like that, I just wouldn't want to, if climate change is included in here, I wouldn't want it to be like a throwaway thing, like as it is right now, it's like, oh, environmental impact, it's like one bullet out of this whole thing. And again, it's just, for me, it doesn't inspire that, like, that would be a focus, where it, I mean, needs to be, we're talking about 2050, you know, and everything's on fire, and so if it's not a focus to make some kind of large climate impact by 2050, it's kind of like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I'm trying to think through how to, yeah, go ahead.
If I'm hearing your concern is that maybe it falls into the why should I care? Like if you care about climate change and how this supports the climate action plans, and maybe if those turn into bullets, there's a way to include it, like how does and how does it support climate action or something? Because I guess transportation is the largest sector, you know, in the city and county towards emissions. So I guess I would second if there's a way.
Yeah.
To do that. It'd be nice to make that.
That actually was split it in, why should I care,
I think one of the challenges specifically with the climate change is, and we struggled through this while we were developing the prioritization process, is it's really hard to get a direct measurement of the climate change impacts of a transportation project, especially if you're not relying on modeling. So I think that this will become apparent as we go through the process, but really, I didn't want to pull this out, you know, separately from the draft goals and objectives until we had the opportunity to talk to the stakeholder groups. But I think the approach is most likely going to be that there are going to be a couple of sort of themes that are interwoven throughout some of these other goals and objectives that aren't necessarily going to be standalone criteria for evaluation, but are going to be they're going to be incorporated throughout the evaluation of the projects. And one of them, I think, is going to be climate change. Because again, we're not really necessarily evaluating the air quality impact of the potential transportation projects, but we are going to create a prioritization process that includes land use coordination, that includes congestion mitigation, that includes, you know, support for multimodal infrastructure, things like that. So I think that messaging will become apparent. It might just be emphasized more strongly as we get further through the process, but we can certainly work to get a statement in here that also makes sure that people who are concerned about it know that that will be part of the evaluation.
So, yeah, I would second to work something like that into my care.
Mhm,
And then, as you say, as more things become concrete,
mhm,
then each in its way, because when Greg was bringing this up, I was looking at the bullet points under what does the plan do? And all of them, except for the first and the last, imply, but do not express
mhm.
what's going, you know, each of those things. So yeah, I just kind of get it now and then.
Sure. Yeah, we can probably work it in there somewhere.
Yeah, because it's not like, I mean, what we did, a lot of stuff that we discussed, or we've been discussing, I guess, and we've seen, you know, definitely relate to that. So it's not like I'm, you know, I know that that's.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
really false, but as an everyday citizen.
Yeah. Maybe one of the other things we should express is that one of the goals is to create alignment between other goals, other regionally identified goals. And there could be an opportunity to link to other related plans.
Yeah, that's probably good because, you know, we don't live in a bubble, so what we do, what neighboring regions do, and all has an impact.
Yeah. Well, any other comments?
Well, no, you mentioned though you're starting to do your focus groups. Is there going to be an opportunity for we as individuals to sit in on some of those?
Yes, I've only scheduled one of them, so once I have the meeting dates, I can send those out to you. I think we're going to do those in person here at the Water Street Center as long as the room is available. I would probably just request that we have one or two people as observers. Yeah.
We can look.
I'll talk. I don't know that they'll be recorded. We did talk to the consultant, so I think after talking through a little bit of what the discussion groups would look like, I think it makes sense to have them actually facilitate the discussion. So I'll probably do an introduction and let them facilitate the discussion, and there will be some note takers.
But there's a professional focus group coordinator who's running it. Focus group.
I mean, they're consultants. Yeah.
I just want to
Yeah.
caution against too many people in the room that aren't part of the focus group, because then it tends to sway the conversations.
Sure.
Well, yeah, I'm suggesting that it would just be one of us, just to be an observer and report back. Just a general summary, hey, this is what this focus group talked about.
I'll also just to manage expectations. I think it might be more of a discussion group than a focus group. Yeah. But I'm working with them to develop some content, and I think we'll have some like activities to get up and do some stuff. So we have the business stakeholder meeting that is scheduled for February 3rd is that meeting, and then the others I was just waiting on follow-ups from a few other people to schedule.
Well, since we won't be meeting before that again, I don't know, you just want to pick somebody at random or check for availability or whatever. I mean,
We could even do a sign up wizard. You know, if you've seen those little sign ups for June. Yeah, we could do
It's
something.
like I said, it's just one person, and you should rotate it around so everybody has a chance. to do this.
Well, there's either gonna be 3 or 4, so only 3 or 4 of you will have an opportunity.
Well, I thought it was the order to potential, there would be more. But if that's all there is, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. If you all are interested, I can share a couple of updates from the project prioritization process that we went through with the MPO TAC. I think I had. Oop, that's not. So there are a couple of changes from when we had previously presented this all to you all. So I'll try to hit those. I don't know why that is not starting at the beginning. So I'll try to hit those a little bit harder and see if you all have any questions. But just as a reminder, this is the overall process that we're working through. So we have Ryan has. Are you presenting on the demographic trends today?
Yes, I
Okay.
can do this.
Okay, so Ryan can update you all on the demographic and land use trends. The existing system operations that will occur largely when we start doing the project evaluation. We'll be able to evaluate the different criteria that are working into the prioritization process. The planning context and background has largely been completed, and then we have a draft set of goals and objectives that will be vetted by the stakeholder groups next month, and then we will come back in March to establish a more finalized set of goals and objectives, and then we'll start working for the public engagement to establish the different weights of the different priorities. So we are moving through the process. Just as a reminder that we were working with the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment to develop the project prioritization process, and there were a couple of guiding principles that they used to develop the process that we're using. One is that we would either use publicly accessible or locally developed data that was specific to our MPO. So the only really locally specific data that we're using is the transit data, and then also the job growth projections. We'll use our travel demand model for those. The methodology is based on our existing staff and technical capacity, and then they were developing a process and not a project. So it was really important to emphasize that this is something that we would take over management once they completed it. We incorporated feedback from previous discussions with MPO TAC and with you all, and that included additional consideration of multimodal system functionality, incorporating more of an equity lens approach to evaluating the criteria in the different areas. So instead of having equity be one criteria, I tried to think through how equity could be incorporated throughout the assessment of the different goals and objectives, and then we added environmental impact factors. So I won't get into this in too much detail, but basically there's a raw score that's calculated, and for every performance measure, there's a 7-point score from low to high that projects will be assigned or normalized to that 7-point scale, and then those will be combined in order to give and multiplied by the weight for each of those criteria. That will give you a final score. These are the draft goals that I anticipate will change after we go through the stakeholder discussion groups. But this is an example of what the overall process will look like. So you have your different performance measures. They're each given a weight. These are just examples. These could be the weights we give each of the performance measures. That could be different weights. The projects are normalized based on the criteria that we use to evaluate and multiplied by the weights, or to give you a weighted project score. And then those are summed up to give you a total. So that's the general process. So a couple things that I'll highlight when we were talking about that the roadway safety criteria is still largely the same. We're using the potential for safety improvement information from VDOT's Highway Safety Action Plan. there are a couple of different thresholds that we'll need to decide which ones we want to use as we get into evaluating the projects. For the pedestrian safety action plan, the original methodology included the spatial analysis using kernel density evaluation. And I think that wasn't really capturing as many of the opportunities where there were pedestrian safety improvement needs as we would have liked. So the methodology that is recommended now is to use the pedestrian safety action plan, which is an action plan developed by VDOT. It both captures where there are existing crash clusters, as well as uses a predictive analysis to identify corridors where there's opportunity to make pedestrian improvements. Donna is nodding her head, so. Yeah. Then the equity and oh, go ahead.
Quick question on the safety one.
Yeah.
I guess I'm very clear. School safety or like micro building safety fits on this.
Yeah, so for some of these, we really had to use proxy data. So, you know, we didn't have bicycle specific data. And so basically in this case, the pedestrian safety action plan, pedestrian safety is kind of also a proxy for bicycle safety.
So the bikes that are hit by vehicles will be captured in the road.
I guess I'm wondering, I mean, because like tragically someone was killed earlier this week, and I feel like there's an in-between there, like there's even the way like a roadway is laid out and how a bike lane exists in sort of a conversation, the vehicle space and the sidewalk. I feel like that would be a missed opportunity. And I guess that's why.
It's a big problem in transportation overall, because traditionally there hasn't been a separate data set addressing bicycle crashes, and now there's micromobility modes and they don't have any standardized data on those. So it's going to take time there, because if you look at all these data sets, like the crashes are average values from the previous 5 years. So it's going to take some time for like the micromobility modes to even show up in these databases. But that's a good question for VDOT. Will they have a slow lane user safety action plan sometime in the future? Right now, I think that for most cyclists, because the most deadly crashes to cyclists involve a vehicle, and those crashes are mostly captured in the vehicle data set, so they're mostly captured. But there's certainly times when cyclists is a pedestrian or cyclists run off the road by themselves or pavement or whatever, and those aren't captured.
And so maybe my follow-up question is just trying to understand. So these are data sets that are feeding into an analysis, and I guess because I'm wondering, like you could potentially assess like the geometry of a project for safety that doesn't rely on pre-existing data set.
So most of our safety data sets are reactive, meaning we collect data about crashes that come from police reports primarily, and the pedestrian one is this predictive component, which is nice now because the pedestrian crash data is actually that sparse. Like it's bad when it happens, but actually if you look at the distribution of how many pedestrian crashes that were compared to something like vehicle crashes, it's far fewer. So I think what you're saying about is it from a geometric design perspective, is it safe? So the idea is when they put in the infrastructure, it should have already met the standard that were determined that this is like minimum criteria it has to meet in order to put in, cyclist or pedestrian infrastructure. So they don't go back and assess.
No, I don't think so. I mean, and the predictive, the part of the predictive aspect of the pedestrian safety action plan is also looking at components that will also apply for bicycle safety. So things like the number of destinations that people might want to travel to, the percentage of disadvantaged communities that live within a certain distance of those areas. So there are other factors other than just the pedestrian infrastructure that is also being measured in that can also serve kind of as a proxy for where there's likely going to be bicycle activity. This isn't perfect, I understand that, but I think it's also the amount of resources that would be necessary for us to have that data available locally to, analyze would be, very expensive. So we're doing the best we can with the data we have available, also knowing that this quantitative analysis is only part of the story, that is going to be told. We're going to do the public outreach as well. We're going to get feedback from people that tell us, you know, I'm nearly hit at this area every day. You know, we're going to get that information too, and hopefully we can put those side by side to understand what's
Are there standards for the bike lanes? I mean, there's a lot of things that are identified as bike lanes. What do you want to go close to? I mean, that's your point. I mean,
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, right? There's a standard and then there's like levels of best practices and they're incrementally different. And I think that's where I was my question is, how can you distinguish between those things and a greater rate to greater safety and sort of like on that way? Like there are some people that will never ride a bike directly adjacent to actually a vehicle traveling.
I think that might actually be answered a little bit more in this next question where we're assessing the accessibility. So again, we are measuring, and I know Marty, you've raised some concerns about using jobs sort of or job destinations as an area, but I think in this case, we're using jobs as a proxy for access to locations where people would want to go, because that's what we have information for. But the next thing is really measuring accessibility. How many places can somebody get by different modes of transportation? And so what they did for accessibility is for the bike access to jobs, they're using level of travel stress, which is basically a measure of how comfortable is it for somebody to take a bike to get from one destination to another. And so you're taking the existing condition, whatever so in this case, the bike access for jobs, you're taking the existing condition and saying that this is how, whatever the level of travel stress is on a rating of 1 to 4, you're saying it's a level 2 travel stress, that's the existing condition. If somebody could access all of the destinations that are at the highest level of travel stress, so level of travel stress 4, that is the opportunity where we could maybe close a network gap by making those, by reducing that level of travel stress to reach all of those potential destinations. So that is sort of getting, it's not exactly measuring safety, but it is measuring a lot of those sort of questions about how easy or comfortable will people feel getting from one place to another.
Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah.
So let me just say this,
Yeah.
we have these GPS programs, look at roads and that ways of going, depending on traffic.
Mm-hmm.
They, I guess, do not have enough information to show whether there are bike paths on those roads. I'm asking, I don't know.
Google Maps does have a recommended bike route type guidance. So
They
if
do have,
you put bike as the mode, it shows you like what Google thinks is the best bike path.
but it doesn't necessarily, yes, I know that, and I have a walking too as well.
Yeah.
But does it show you whether they're traveling on streets or on bike paths? That's my question. I don't know. I'm just looking at something.
Yeah.
They have like it's green is separated. Lighter green is maybe. I forget exactly.
So why isn't that part of the, so, okay, so if there is some information there, why isn't that fed into looking at the bike stress, bike access for jobs? Because then you can look at which roads have the best bike paths and which don't.
I think it is the level of travel stress is like a rating for how comfortable the infrastructure is to cycle on. So it takes into consideration not only the type of infrastructure that's there, so it's a separated bike lane, share or like dedicated bike path,
Right.
and then also if it's adjacent to traffic, what is the level of traffic and the speed of the vehicle traffic? Because the faster that is, and the busier that is, the less comfortable that is. So that actually is, I don't know how many like different evaluations of the LCS are doing, but that is part of that one.
We're using, I don't know if this is where Google pulls their data, but we're using the National Accessibility Evaluation information. It's a pooled fund study that VDOT participates in. Remember, we have to go back to that criteria that we started with, which is using the publicly accessible data that
Well, we're talking about
VDOT is.
Apple Maps. So all this.
We don't know what analytics they're necessarily using. So that's what we're using to pull our analytics from to measure that. And it should be pretty similar, it sounds like. Yeah. Yeah. So then we're using the transit access to jobs. So for each of these, we're comparing the current condition to an ideal condition. So for transit access to jobs, we're comparing existing transit access to what automobile access would be during the similar peak hours. So the opportunity where there are the biggest differences between transit access and vehicle access, that's where there's an opportunity to make improvements. And then auto access to jobs would be the difference between how many jobs are accessible during peak travel hours compared to how many jobs would be accessible during off-peak hours, assuming those businesses were still open, I suppose. And then we will do that both for the general population and then as well for the equity priority communities using the V-Trans methodology.
And then is there any cross matching between accidents, let's say on bikes or let's say on bikes? And the access on roads? Do you look at accidents and then look at, well, what's the bike access?
This is going to cumulatively take all of those into account to give us those hot spots on where is there an access need as well as where is there a safety need. So we're going to see where there are opportunities for improvement.
And this is the consultants who are doing it. Are you doing it? Or?
Well, they're just developing the process that we're going to use. But you're saying, are we improving? You're asking if like we're improving access in a place that is going to introduce more safety risks. Well, I think that if we're improving access, we're going to be we're not going to be improving access necessarily. We're going to be improving the infrastructure, right? So we're not going to necessarily, we wouldn't be improving access on unsafe infrastructure. But keep in mind that this is just helping us identify the need. So when it comes to designing the project, we're going to have to determine what type of project is going to, be most effective at resolving the problem. That this process isn't going to determine that for us. Any other questions on this one? Okay. The mobility and system efficiency is pretty straightforward. These are really standard evaluation criteria using travel time index and planning time index or travel time reliability. Yeah, that's planning time index for these. So the travel time index is basically how long it takes you to get somewhere during peak travel hours compared to free flow travel. And then the travel time reliability is what percentage of the time can you reliably get to your destination within a standard period of time. What we added in addition to, again, emphasize sort of the multimodal system operation was the bus transit on-time performance. So this would use the on-time performance of the transit systems based on data that they provide to us and determine where there might be some opportunities for improvements to the system that would increase their on-time performance. Questions on that? Okay. Land use and economic development. This one feels a little bit counterintuitive, I think, but basically this is where we are trying to improve the walkability of the defined growth areas. So we want to, so in this case, we want to make access to destinations that are important to the community that are non-work destinations, so places like parks, libraries, schools, grocery stores, those kinds of places, where there is opportunity to improve access to those. So in this case, it's actually a little bit counterintuitive that they'll pull in walk scores and bike scores and projects in areas that already have a high walk score and bike score, meaning that there's already existing infrastructure and there's already a lot of destinations within an area that are accessible by walking or biking. Those areas will be more highly prioritized because you're basically finding opportunities to improve the connectivity to the non-work destinations in the growth areas.
So you're saying the opposite. If they have low walkability scores, you're not going to make investments.
You're not going to prioritize those for investments because what that means is that there's not a lot of opportunity to, there's not a lot of things within walking distance that you're connecting people to in those cases.
Critical mass. No idea. We might also be water, which is already it's some existing.
Well, that change as like the city is advocating higher density rebuilding essentially, and so is the county in a sense. So that seems somewhat counterintuitive because as you get higher density, should be more opportunity for people to take advantage, to build in various types of infrastructure to promote walking, hiking. And if you don't do that, then you're not really addressing the environment as an example.
Sure, yeah, that is also though going to, as that happens, first of all, we are defining where we're going to basically, what areas are going to be eligible to be prioritized. Is that going to be the whole MPO area, or is that going to be defined, the defined growth areas? So that's one of the decisions that we'll have to make around this. But as there's more development and as there's more investment into the infrastructure, that's also going to create changes to the walk scores and bike scores as well.
As there is planned or actually completed, what's your?
So I think this is one of the challenges with the walk score and bike score, because this is a procured data set that V-Trans gets, but so I don't know that I can answer that, but I would assume that it's probably constructed.
To improve construction, I mean, well, I'm pushing you because, you know, up north or what's where we live, there's a lot of construction going on. Some of it's been approved, some of it's in the planning stages, it's going to go up there. And similarly, there is that by the giant down by hydraulic, there's a big lot there that we talked about. That's going to get a lot of, well, that one is obviously a place where you should infrastructure improvement, because that's been targeted for a lot of apartments that North Point and Coles and whatever. There's a lot of building going on. See all the time. You would think there would be some thinking about what type of additional infrastructure or there. And I somehow, the way you describe the criteria doesn't appear to be the candidate.
It might not be prioritized as high for those land use, but I would also say that that's probably also going to be captured in some of these accessibility evaluations as well. So they're basically measuring both different aspects on where is there a barrier to access in general that can be improved. So that those are places where that might score a little bit higher. And then where are there opportunities to improve the walkability of an area? So I think both of those are being measured.
So you're right now giving us pieces. Is there at some point where you're going to sum it up so you get sort of a matrix of how all these pieces put together and get weighted? Because what you're doing is giving us each piece and giving us this an analysis for that piece, but I can't picture it in my head which ones, how will weigh the different priorities.
Well, that goes back to the chart you showed at the beginning.
Yeah.
The weighting factor.
Yeah, but I don't remember.
But then you get a score, and then that's.
But
The score incorporates all of these factors into.
that doesn't say how they're each weighted units, right?
We haven't determined that yet. Yeah, because we need to have the public feedback to tell us how important the different criteria are again comparatively. Yeah.
Just to add something, kind of the same point, it seems very active, what is now, what is there now? And we have theoretically, we have this new comp plan, at least in Charlottesville, and there's this new zoning ordinance that's gonna come out soon. Seemed like you'd wanna,
Yeah, I did not explain this very well, but one of the ways that we will get to the future growth projections is that the walk score and bike score will also be weighted against the projected future population and employment levels. We'll use the travel demand model. So if there's an area that is projected to have a large amount of growth compared to another area that might remain at a more stagnant population level, those areas will have more weight for for how important it is to invest in that infrastructure.
The county also is doing, redoing the plan and to make things walkable, you have to kind of get away from the traditional zoning model where here you've got industrial and nowhere near that can be the housing. The housing has to be way, way far away. So obviously, if you work at that industry, you can't walk there because zoning won't let you build a house anywhere near where the industry is. So as the comp plans get more aggressive, as it were, then you can have mixtures so that you can have housing next to or even right above shops, retail, or whatever.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, no, here, this has to be here, and this has to be 5 miles away.
Yeah.
How do we ensure, let's say, sidewalks, to non-work destination, like on the way to the school, that what's being put in is best in class, as opposed to the bare minimum, oh, we put 8 white painted strips on the ground, and people still speed through, versus an elevated, different color, flashing lights, narrow ends, there's lots of models for best practices when it comes to crosswalks, for example. How do we make sure that what gets approved isn't just, oh, we put a crosswalk in there, we address that?
I don't know that I have a very satisfactory answer for you, because that's really sort of not, the long range transportation plan for this part that we're talking about right now, we're just prioritizing the needs. We're not even talking about how projects are going to get selected. We're saying, how do we identify what the most important areas are that we need to correct? So I think when it comes to that, it's really looking at what are the implementation policies around that are adopted by the localities. And I mean, honestly, a lot of it is also going to come down to what the VDOT guidelines are and what is going to potentially be, how much can we do and still be able to have viable projects that can move forward to get funding, and what are the resources to do those. So I think, I think that transportation access to schools is going to be a growing conversation that we have, because as we're all seeing right now with bus driver shortages, the multimodal access to schools is becoming a more important conversation. And obviously, when you're talking about younger children traveling to school, I think that makes everybody much more aware of the safety concerns. But I don't know exactly how you assure that. And I feel like that might end up being more of a local policy that would provide that assurance than something we could do from the MPO. And then the last criteria is the environment and the resiliency. So basically, this isn't necessarily that this is going to occur at the end. So after we go through that matrix and we get this raw score, there would be an adjustment based on the environment and resiliency system needs. So what has been recommended is a 5% adjustment for segments that are exposed to historical flooding. There actually are not very many of those according to VTrans, but that also could change as we experience climate change. And so that would help any projects that are experiencing those historic flooding incidences have a higher priority. And then there would also be an adjustment for economically distressed communities to also factor in that equity component. So those would also have higher priorities. Any other questions? Yeah.
Wondering if there is an opportunity here to take some of those previous metrics you mentioned and translate them into an environmental impact of sport. To me, this is all resiliency and not much about environmental impact. So, for example, think about turning the LTS metric you mentioned, an actual transit access. Both of those to me speak almost as strong, like equity and accessibility access definitely, but they also speak to environmental impact reductions. And so I'm wondering if there's a way to translate those, like, since you already have the data set, into emissions reductions.
Yeah, translating them into like an actual emissions reduction evaluation, I think is something that just isn't possible. I think if maybe what you're talking about is maybe reframing those to be environmental goals instead of accessibility goals potentially, that's certainly something that we could do. I think in some of these, there are a number of different ways that these could be categorized and resorted. So I mean, if that's messaging that feels like it's disconnected from this process, that we hear a lot of feedback on, why isn't this included, then that might be, we might look at how we could organize these a little bit differently.
That makes sense, and I didn't mean like a hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe that's a good focus for the question. But I was interested in, like, to Greg's point, how does this connect to the connection? And then flip to the, if I read the design section, see anything about how does this reduce climate change? Even though I think it's in there.
Yeah. The other thing, like I mentioned, is that we may end up sort of having another sort of like category of these where we specify that there are guiding principles that are built into this, and that's consideration for climate change, consideration for equity, consideration for multimodal system improvements. So that could be the other way, but I think I want to wait until we get stakeholder feedback before we sort of determine what makes the most sense. Any other? Yeah.
I don't know if you can answer this, but
That's always a good sign.
so taking away cars is a safety improvement, is an environmental improvement. If you are replacing it with bike, pedestrian, and bus infrastructure, right? So the more cars you take off the road, more improvements you're going to see in those areas. So I'm just wondering if somehow that's incorporated, as if there is a negative score to, yes, it's improving maybe some congestion issues for cars, or like people in cars can get from one place to another faster. But with that, there's also a negative score towards safety and environmental impacts, because you're opening those. You understand what I'm saying? So if you're opening those spaces to cars, instead of focusing on bike and bus, you are negatively affecting those areas.
So your question, I'm not sure if I understand the question. I understand what you're saying. I don't know if I'm understanding what the question is.
The question's like, is there almost a weight, like a negative weight?
Yeah, congestion mitigation, if you address that by adding more lanes, which really just adds traffic, it necessarily impacts pedestrian safety. So are you able to show a penalty? Yeah.
There is a penalty in my mind already. It's only counting 5% in the weight, so it's under value.
These are illustrative purposes. I will say that we do not have really significant congestion issues in Charlotte. I mean, I know some people will disagree, but like, yeah. But we want to eliminate it completely, because I think the types of improvements that we would be looking at for our area wouldn't necessarily be things that would that would increase the lanes. It would be operational improvements that could also have safety benefits. So we're looking at things like the innovative intersections, where safety, where pedestrian and multimodal safety improvements could also be addressed, as well as improve the efficiency. I think there's an opportunity potentially to have a conversation about whether or not we want to have any sort of, value for congestion mitigation, but I don't know that we want to make it negative, because that's also not, we also want we also don't want to improve congestion, because that also is going to have negative environmental effects as well.
That's something that we should think. I think it's very easy for us to think about this from the experience of someone who, bikes, walks, drives to work, and that's what you're doing. But transportation is more than just about moving people to work. I mean, these roadways also serve the buses that we're talking about here, emergency services, freight. things get delivered to places that you need, wanting access to hospital. I mean, it's not just a, you know, I think it's easy to frame it as a car versus bike commute type issue, but that's not. To be honest, we can go, I support the growth of the bicycle mode share, but you're only gonna be able to reach so many destinations on a bike. You have to be able-bodied, you have to be able to know how to ride a bike, it has to be a reasonable distance, and for a lot of people, it's gotta be the right bike. Right, so I think as much as we want to promote this green mode, we can't ignore the fact that we still live in a country where automobile travel is the backbone of our transportation system.
Yeah, but I mean. Bike isn't the only. Like, we're talking about like, yeah, I mean, you mentioned like trucks and buses and ambulances, but there's way to change the road so that those are the only things that are using that, or a certain time of day, there's only things that are using that, right? You don't have to leave all the roads open to personal vehicle use.
I agree with you that theoretically there are ways to do this, and as a researcher, we think about these things all the time, but realistically, as a MPO in Charlottesville size, what solutions in other, you know, metro regions in the US can successfully implement something like that?
Even with cities that have very good transportation, good Paris, London, you will see a lot of traffic there. I mean, you don't never need a car, even in New York. I didn't. But frankly, there's a lot of, you walk around most of that city, but there's plenty of traffic there.
Yeah,
You know, there's-
well, lots
so
of traffic,
realistically,
lots of traffic doesn't mean. You will create traffic by eliminating the areas in which personal vehicles go. That's not a bad thing. It's only bad for the person, really.
But London, you know, charges people in the city. And
So I should say that we do the congestion, so
The other thing I think maybe that to keep in mind is that we are also going to be talking about, when we're talking about the long range transportation plan, we're not really getting into the secondary street system, and that might be where there might be more of the opportunity to actually convert roads to you know, non-vehicular roads. But we're really talking about like the regional significantly corridors, which are places where there's a lot of vehicular traffic, but a lot of it is also major thoroughfares for people traveling interregionally as well.
Yeah, for instance, Interstate 64 doesn't have any adverse effect on pedestrians and bicycles. They don't go there, so the cars go and they're gone. So there are ways to separate cars from the people, but there's traffic on 64 isn't. You two are coming from Charlottesville. You have to be able to come. And Albemarle County has a lot of rural areas. A lot of people live way too far to think about bicycling or walking to it.
Wonder what one of the aspects out here, I think is there a way? Measure or estimate the impact of reduced demand, because you know, in many ways, the emission mitigation can run against the environmental goals we talked about this morning. Long term, zoning goals for urban core terms. So is that something that can be captured here? Because then maybe that gets to this like concern that there's been such a long time of. I think, you know, without knowing what projects is looking at, the worry is that we just keep adding things, or we promote, you know, quicker access with these people further out, and then again, we're kind of like fighting, but it's just in battle.
Well, I can't like 100% assure you. I can tell you though that any capacity improvement projects that involve ag lanes is probably going to be cost prohibitive for us to pursue right now. So really, when we're talking about congestion mitigation, we're really talking about operational improvements at intersections.
Like the lights.
Yeah, like the lights, or like a diverging diamond or a roundabout or something like that.
I should also consider that cars and stop and go traffic have a lot of emissions, even if there's, right, so it's a trade-off, it's not like a very clean, this is the winning solution and this is the solution, it really depends on the situation.
Right, well, sorry, Ryan, I know you had the demographic data. Thank you for the discussion.
And Mr. Chair, we can, it's, if the demographic section was available in your packet, if you all do not have any questions, I don't have to present that or show it, but
The graphs were made from the ACS data by like Campbell. Okay. I had one question about one of the graphs where it was showing the population in Charlottesville and Albemarle by, I think it was by educational attainment. I think I'm confused as to why both of those graphs showed a decrease in the number of households under all educational levels, even though the overall.
yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah, in fact, I will actually go back and check on version for this particular data set. So when I first looked at this back in September, October, I pulled these numbers, but just a couple weeks ago, I went back to peruse some data and I noticed that some numbers have changed. So these numbers could in fact could have changed. But what was interesting was what I saw, what you just pointed out, was the decrease from 2015 to 2021. But yet, when you add up the, at least when it comes to the graduate professional degree and the bachelor's degree, yeah, you do really. But yeah, I will check that. I'm not quite sure why that is. I will say this in general that the first like 3 slides or tables. These are just comparing the 2021 American Community Survey data with the 2015. 2015 data was used in the last LRTP update. So I think when I move forward in the future, I would probably not have this broken out by jurisdiction. I think I would probably convince this just to and exclude those populations outside of the area. This first one, demographics, race, I think the only decrease that I saw was in the city of African American, vehicle availability, poverty, so also characteristics, industry, travel time, work, transportation, carpool, bus.
Oh, wait, do you want to comment on that one, right? We were trying to figure out why everybody in that upper northwest corner was bicycling to work. Anybody know?
This census tract, thank you for pointing this out. This census tract is actually the 3 block groups. This is the block group. That is the block group. Yeah, all of my activity.
Yeah.
They don't.
Is that the entire Culpeper district? So I've read this before, so that's just that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's Albemarle, and then, yeah, probably in the regional national probably have it.
That contains some of the most popular recreational.
routes.
Yeah, well, that was what the focus is like, maybe people who like to bike live there, and so they also bike to work.
Ridge Road, Scab,
Yeah.
of course, if you've ever come in, it work. A lot of people bike up there
Sure,
all the time.
I think them for bike enthusiasts.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I know people have visited. I have cycles. Put sugar on
Interesting.
You have something, you have one chart that's means to work by age. And I ended up the percentages basically, from Charlottesville, they're 100%, but I don't know what percentage of the population they're talking about. So it says mean, so you know, whatever that percentage is, let's say 45% for Charlottesville is 20 to 24 goes. But what's the percentage of population that they're talking about that's working, and what's the percentage that's not working, but still living in the area and using transportation, going to golf courses? So I didn't see anything there unless I missed it.
Yeah. Marty, I think I get your question. You're going to know if there is data or information captured where they're showing not
working, but still living in the county and using transportation. A lot of people like that. If you ever been in the county, it's a fair amount of time.
Yeah, you know, that probably wouldn't be reflected in census data, but yeah, definitely I would think our cat would have
It should be part of whatever they're looking at, because they're using transportation, bus, cars, going around the county using roads all day long.
What? Yeah, we're just.
I only looked at this one because I don't see anything else for age. That was why I sort of focused on it.
Yeah, and Ryan was just pulling the data that's reported on the ACS. So the question you're asking is really what the differential is between, you know, how many people are represented there
Yes.
versus the total population.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
I gotcha.
perfect.
actually, if we had about 2 minutes, I could have an ATS up. I don't do it. I mean,
Yeah.
And then we just have some more charts here, this was in 2045, language characteristics, language party status, map. Disability. So, I might have mentioned this before. I think, so what you see now here are census tracts. It was just easier to get the data. In fact, most of the data that the ATS put out were easier to obtain, to do all these data sets. But I think that I may go and alter the final start using block groups. So some of these maps will have more colors to it rather than these sort of big blocks of color. And then you get confusing things like the white map or the by category where you've got this dark color in the northwestern corner of the county. It's really encompassing 3 different block groups. Median age, population 65 and older, population 29 years and younger. Ratio those 65 and older, 29 and younger. Ratio female to male. Very small percentages. But I think overall we're working. Yeah, these are very small numbers. one thing that I know Sandy had pointed out, that I'll also try to do is, where I've got the ramp or I will actually probably have numbers there. So I'll probably get rid of the legend. This here shows the population. I probably should have started off with this. This is the population that's in the strat. With Albemarle and Charlottesville, I think there's a 158,000. And then the following maps are the actual races that I've broken down. And then the percent per this. Right. And I think also too, there are like 3 or 4 other categories. I know that there's 2 or more races. There's native Indian. But I think I want to incorporate those as well. I know traditionally the focus on Black, Hispanic, Asian. But I think I will probably include those other races as well. And again, use a different geography other than track, probably use block groups. But then you get to a whole privacy. Kind of mindful of that.
All right, there's Sean Tubbs, is anyone from the public, have anything to say, Sean? So speak up. This is not, we already know.
Thank you, everyone.